guys, welcome back to Of Stone and Clay. This is episode 119. Today we have two guests, which I've actually never done before. So you guys should feel awesome and special.
It's an honor.
Today we have Boone and Kaprena Christiansen that are a married couple and also both therapists. I had on a few weeks ago Tasha, which is your little sister. And she's like, if you really want a good episode, have these guys on. And so I was like, I do want a really good episode. So tell me how you guys both got into therapy. What is it about a human that makes you want to dig into people's problems and issues and figure out why people are hurting and why people aren't healed yet? And yeah, what was sort of the impetus for that for you guys? Maybe it's different for each of you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was about to let you go first. My emphasis in college was African nonprofit development.
Okay, which is adjacent to therapy.
Yes, well, agricultural nonprofit development. So I actually spent a couple summers doing research projects on that in different African countries. Right before I applied to grad school, I spent 40 days in the desert of Namibia, living with a tribe and herding cows and goats and stuff.
Wow.
But in the end, as I learned more about the nonprofit world, I learned how much of a dead end it can really be, especially if you don't really understand intimately the people that you're trying to help. Like trying to cast wide nets of trying to help people can often be a big waste of time and money and can sometimes be destructive.
Yeah.
And so just one of my other interests in college that I got into just doing research with the BYU Marriage and Family Department was family therapy. I was able to watch videos of the graduate students doing couple and family therapy. And I thought, wow, this is how you actually get to know someone well enough to help them.
Yeah.
Were you coding those sessions? I'm trying to remember what you were doing watching those sessions.
We were like ticking boxes of things that happened during sessions to quantify data of what was going on. And so I ended up applying to marriage and family therapy graduate school and ended up at Auburn University and have just been going from there and have no regrets about it.
So you were kind of hypnotized by the craft.
Yeah, it is so fulfilling to be able to help someone in real time.
Yeah. Do you feel like it also just helps you sort of perpetually heal and work on yourself as well?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because if you're not doing, if you get stuck with a client, chances are it's because there's something stuck inside yourself.
Interesting, yeah.
And when you really introspect and look at what's going on, you'll find, oh my gosh, if I fix that thing, or in the process of fixing that thing, you learn what your client needs.
Right.
And that's also very exciting and often kind of it's a little bit embarrassing when I smack my head and I say wow, I knew that. I just needed to get past that block inside myself.
Yeah. Or you could just dump it off to your wife and say, you handle this one.
Right.
I think he's a little bit better at that than me. I am more sometimes the
You're good.
The passer offer.
Yeah. Yeah. So what about you?
Yeah. So Tasha talked about this a little bit when she was on the show with you, but when I was maybe 15 or 14, I can't remember, we adopted 3 little adorable Hispanic babies from the foster care system. And that was a really kind of a wild journey, as anyone that's worked with the foster care system knows. And so rubbed shoulders with a lot of social workers and just saw the need and saw all the pain, and then kind of walked our own story of adoption, and just kind of knew that nothing that I could do as a career would be meaningful to me if it didn't help families, if it didn't have to do with relationships, if it wasn't about creating meaningful contact, and kind of just helping each other along. So I kind of knew from a young age I wanted to do something like that.
Yeah.
And I worked in residential just as a therapeutic aide, or residential staff, I think is maybe what they call it now. with teen girls, and I did a lot of music. So I ran their jammers program,
Okay.
which is so cool. I'm slightly below competent in like drums, bass, guitar, that kind of stuff,
Nice.
piano. I'm mostly a violinist, but I used the little knowledge that I had on all those instruments to kind of get them going. And then we all kind of learned together, and just that therapeutic experience was so beautiful that I was like, yes, this is the direction. And then studied marriage and family at BYU Idaho, and just loved that. And then had a pretty rocky first marriage. And then just, I thought I would be a stay-at-home mom, and then just the rockiness of my marriage, and then it eventually coming to an end, made me obviously need to formulate another plan for my life. And I didn't really see myself going back to grad school at that time, but I got back into entry-level therapy stuff, and then met this guy, and I had a son at that time. So I was pretty direct with him, and this was all kind of long distance. He was still doing his graduate degree in Alabama.
Okay.
And I basically was just like, this guy's going to be a therapist. I think that's probably a good direction for me.
Yeah.
Because I was, sold on the field already. And so, I mean, it's safe to say I pursued Boone pretty hard.
Nice.
And
Congrats, Boone.
yeah, it worked out.
Yeah.
So, and then once he was finished with his degree, we had our baby together. That's our daughter. And shortly after that, we just decided, like, I want to do this too.
Yeah.
I don't just want to, it's never just want to stay at home. Staying at home is absolutely where my heart is. And I found that staying involved in that world was also really good for my health and really important to me. So Boone gets to be stay-at-home dad 2 days a week, and I get to be stay-at-home mom 3 days a week.
Nice.
And then
That's a great system.
Yeah, and it really is the dream. So that's kind of how we came about where we are now.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you guys both will do individual and couples therapy, right?
And family.
Okay, yeah. So I'm just gonna get out there with these random curiosities of mine, but I guess one of my biggest questions, which I always ask myself, and in dating I ask girls this, I'm like, what is it that makes people so often get into relationships that are so obviously toxic and so damaging to their souls, but they just can't seem to leave, can't seem to, and not even necessarily abusive, but just, in a place where there isn't as much love as they deserve. There isn't as much validation. They're not being seen as they should, but for some reason, that's just what they always seem to end up in. And I guess my question is more, is this a pretty obvious pattern of the way you were raised or the experiences you've been through, or is a lot of it your approach and what the red flags you're missing? I'm sure it's a combination of a lot of things, but what are your guys' thoughts on that? Whoever wants to answer.
Well, I do have it. Yeah.
Maybe you could start with personal experience.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, obviously, well, I was engaged 5 times before I married my first husband, because I loved to say yes.
You loved rings?
I only got like 1 ring out of all 5 of those. But I think you can look at it this way. We get into relationships based on what we need. We don't always know how to get what we need. In fact, often if the need is a pretty big gaping wound that was a result of trauma from childhood, we probably don't have any good ideas about how to get what we need.
Okay, yeah.
So here's an example. I needed to be the queen bee. I needed whoever I dated to think that I was the best thing that ever happened to them. And so I sought out relationships where I was made to feel that way, and then settle into that. And that part of me, that part that is like screaming for validation, is soothed. And she's like, oh, good, this is exactly what I need. And I've got this other part that took a backseat because this part was screaming to get what she wanted. She's got what she wants. And now I've got this part that's like, well, what about how you don't want to be this guy's mom? And, you've kind of put yourself in that position. And so then I start feeling violated, that I am doing everything in the relationship and I'm the one that knows what's going on and makes all the choices and that they look up to. And what about how I sometimes want to be able to live in my weakness a little bit instead of like white knuckling, always being strong and, you know, that decisive woman. That was kind of the energy that I would give off. And
Like when you're getting worshipped, then it means that you are the powerful one, right? You don't get taken care of by the person who worships you.
Right.
other than the worship being what I, you know,
Right.
and
So real quick, how do we balance, like, there's part of you that anybody kind of wants to feel worshiped in a loving relationship, and you want to feel adored. And I think a certain level of that is good and is appropriate and is awesome, right? But where do we draw the line of, like, maybe putting someone on a pedestal or yeah, like you don't actually want to worship another human, but we also kind of want to feel worshiped. So yeah, where do we find the balance there?
Right. Well, if you're two people that worship each other and yourselves, essentially you both feel God-like,
worthy.
you feel worthy, you feel valuable, you feel important, then that's the like ideal state, right?
It's about reciprocity.
Right. That like I value you so much, and I value myself so much.
Yeah.
Meaning that I actually don't need your worship to be okay. But I do worship you because I love you.
Yeah.
And it does feel good when you worship me. It still feels, you know, I don't have to have it to survive, but it feels good. And
right. So it's almost like there's, in a great relationship, it's almost like there's 4 relationships, right?
Totally.
There's you and your partner, there's you and yourself, and then there's your partner and you, and then your partner and themselves, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like when Boone and I were first married, this was hard because I had never had a very functional relationship before, before him. And I married him because I was like, this feels different. This feels weird in a good way.
Yeah.
But even so, I almost called it off a number of times because he honestly was so much healthier than me.
Yeah.
And that made me feel so incredibly vulnerable that he was eager to help me feel important, and he did care about me, but it wasn't in the intoxicating, ultra intense way that I was used to, and that made me feel safe in previous relationships.
Love bombing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a good word for it. And so I was doing frequent check-ins and saying, dude, I am not sure that you are into this. And that's fine. Just tell me.
Yeah.
Are you into this? And every step of the way, he was like, yeah, no, I am.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. I did a lot of growing, and I was looking for something different. So I stuck with it at that growth edge for me. But choosing to date in that space was terrifying.
Yeah.
It was super terrifying. I just held on to this hope that if this is coming from a place of Boone being a stable human, I want to learn how to be that. And if putting him through the ringer of dating me is not, compromising his health, and he doesn't break up with me, then I really think I can learn how to do this.
Yeah.
And I think it's obviously still a journey, but I really think that the health of our relationship is due to the fact that he was able to hang in there with me, and I was able to be clear that, like, I know I am bringing baggage, and I want to learn. Please help me.
Yeah.
At least I feel like that's what happened.
Right. Like I had no concept of love bombing, which has proven somewhat detrimental to relationships in the past, like where girls might have said, like, Boone, I'm not sure if you even like me.
Yeah.
Sort of thing.
Yeah.
But
that's probably why you did well with girls.
Well,
did you do well with girls?
That's a separate debate.
I never had relationships that lasted super long.
Yeah.
It's true. But I also didn't feel like resentful or spiteful of the process because like if that didn't feel okay to me, I felt okay to move on.
Yeah.
And I guess kind of going back to your original question, like what keeps people in relationships that seem to be really bad for them? I think so much of it has to do with a healthy attachment, which another way to frame that is, do they have a safety net if things go poorly? And I've always felt like I had that. I always felt like my parents liked me.
Yeah.
Right. And even admired me in some ways. My parents didn't give me very many things. They didn't buy me a whole lot of stuff.
Yeah.
But I always felt like they liked me. And that has, I felt like that's carried me through so many, potentially hard experiences or experiences that might have been traumatic for someone else. Cause I always felt like, well, if this goes bad, like mom still likes me.
Right. You don't feel like if this relationship I'm in, if it ends, I'm completely bereft of love.
Right.
Right. But if you feel like this is my only shot at it, this is my only like way to have this sort of connection, then you're probably just going to stay.
I think that water is a great analogy for validation. Like we need water to live and we need validation to live. The problem is that if we don't get enough water, we'll die after 3 days. If you don't get enough validation, you will become steadily, increasingly thirstier and thirstier and thirstier forever.
Yeah, well, I've met some thirsty girls out there.
Like until you die, right? In which case, any water, like you will be desperate for any form of water,
right.
Even if it's one love bomb for every 10 abusive interactions. Like, hey, I need that little bit of water.
Nothing.
It's worth the cost due to how much like thirst I am experiencing.
Yeah, that makes sense. Without naming names, do you guys feel like you can pretty easily, when you're out and about and you're socializing with people, you can pretty easily be like, that's a happy, healthy couple. That couple is a disaster and needs some help. And maybe not that extreme, but are there a lot of like, do most couples kind of wear it on their sleeve, you think? Just based off your experience?
I think you need to, there are some extreme cases where you could probably just see it in the body language. Yeah. But I think within a few minutes of talking to people, you start to see signs of how they see the world. And just in the way that they talk, I might not be able to tell you what their exact struggles are, but it's just kind of the vibe that you probably feel it too when you talk to someone where you're like, this feels like a kind of a stable aura, if you will. And I think it's just, there's something to that, but then also there will be more obvious things like, if I meet somebody and immediately they're just excusing like what a mess they look. I usually am just more prepared for these mom dates or whatever. And little things like that kind of help you understand how they feel about themselves. And then that is probably a pretty strong indication of what kind of needs they're bringing to a partnership.
Interesting. Yeah.
So,
yeah, to me, this is like the simplest way I view it is that I can almost tell how good a married couple is or any relationship by just how they talk about each other, especially like if they're not around each other. It seems like the ones that are probably struggling, there's always a level of annoyance and resentment or frustration and it's like, of course that happens with any couple, like you're living together, life is hard, but the couples I tend to admire, they're just always like, oh, I can't, like, my wife is so awesome. You guys are going to love her. And like, they just talk about each other differently, what are some things that like, if you could sit down with any couple, you'd be like, I wish most couples could just know this and I could just ingrain this into their brains.
Great question. You know what? I think it would be to teach people the true definitions of criticism. Maybe criticism and boundaries.
Yeah.
Right? Most people don't know that when they're like making a comment about what their partner is doing in some way, that they're criticizing them,
Okay. Yeah.
right? When you're doing something that is not expressing a feeling, right? Like, hey, I feel sad when you do that, or I feel hurt, or I feel happy when you do that. Those are emotional expressions saying you shouldn't do it that way, or that's wrong, or that's right. These are all.
What's your problem?
Yeah, these are criticisms.
Yeah, that one.
It's amazing how many times, like, I'll stop a conversation. I'll be like, hey, so you just criticized your partner. Tell me where that's coming from. And they don't even realize that they criticize their partner. And they might even say, like, no, I'm just setting a boundary right now. I'm like, okay, you also don't know what a boundary is. And so I'd want them to know, like, how to express emotions rather than criticisms. And then that boundaries are actions that we take to protect ourselves. They're not things that you try and make someone else do, or ways that you try and punish someone else.
Yeah. How do you deal with boundaries that you're trying to establish with people that are very much in your life that don't really respect your boundaries? Like, especially, I think with certain people, you decide, okay, if they're not going to, I'm going to cut them out. But what do you do if it's your parents or your siblings or people that are just very much in your life, and you're like, man, I'm trying to tell you, like, this kind of language makes me sad, or is upsetting, or when you do this, I have a hard time, but they just don't really respect those.
Oh, we love this conversation. We love talking about boundaries. And maybe the disclaimer is that everybody has the right to their own definition of a boundary, and that's fine. We don't pretend that we, like, wrote the dictionary definition. However,
but as far as a definition that's actually useful,
so
Right.
After
you
that
can
caveat,
make up your own definition.
you just said, but here's the right way.
Just a small critique.
Yes. First, you have to understand what is not a boundary to understand what is a boundary.
Okay.
This is not a boundary. You can't talk to me like that anymore. I won't have it. Stop talking to me like that. That's not a boundary.
Because it's not specific.
It's not actionable.
Okay.
yeah,
So-
she's trying to tell me what to do. She's not doing something to protect herself, because if anything, I'm going to respond to that by saying, I can say whatever I want.
Yeah.
Which is true.
Right.
So here's the actual definition of a boundary that we operate with with our clients. A boundary is essentially an if-then statement where you are informing them that if they do X, or if X happens, you will take Y action. So, for example, let's say Boone gets really frustrated. He never raises his voice at me, but let's just say he's a guy that does. Then this is an actual boundary, since I gave the example of what is not. Here's an actual boundary. It's an if-then. Boone, if you continue to speak to me in ways that make me feel unsafe, or where I feel unsafe, I will immediately stop the conversation and separate myself. I will go seek safety.
You can't do that.
And then I walk out of the room.
Right.
Because I actually have no power to make Boone stop or start doing anything. And if a boundary, if you remember the key, that a boundary is about protecting oneself, then it's easy to generate the action that would be needed to protect yourself.
Right.
So if at Sunday dinner your dad can't stop criticizing you, then this is not a boundary. Dad, it's really hurting me when you say things about my parenting. I need a boundary here. That's not a boundary.
Yeah,
There's no actionable.
Right.
Here's a boundary. Dad, if you keep making comments about how I parent my kids, I will come over to dinner less.
Yeah.
I will only come over when I feel like I have the stamina to withstand the comments you might make.
Right.
And I will be the one determining that. I will inform you which Sundays that is.
Right.
Or just, I won't come over for Sunday
Right.
dinner anymore.
So it's really emboldening, because you're just saying, like, you don't have to respect my boundary, but this is my boundary.
I respect my boundary.
And if you don't respect it, that's your prerogative, I guess, but then I'm going to recuse myself, or I'm going to, whatever. Right.
And this,
Boundaries exist regardless of the other person's reverence of the boundary.
Yeah. That's a good point.
yeah. So it's kind of like,
It doesn't, like, my boundary doesn't depend on what you do at all.
Yeah.
It's
so
entirely
Boone
just what
can't
I'm going
really,
to do.
you can't really break my boundaries, because if it's
Yeah.
a true boundary, it's something that I determine. So when my clients come in and they say, my dad just keeps crossing all my boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
In my mind, I'm like, okay, we tuck away that we need to review the definition of a boundary. And of course, so I hold space for what's happening. At least I try to.
Yeah,
but in my mind, I'm like, you forgot what a boundary is.
Right. You should just have a flashcard that has a definition.
Right.
And so
If then
yeah,
statement.
keep talking,
Yeah.
but read
And of
this.
course, what they mean is I'm feeling so violated. I need a boundary.
Yeah.
Well, or I'm too afraid to enforce my boundary.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, let me take a left turn. This might be a right turn, but what's good advice or what's good practice if you're just deeply heartbroken and you're like, I don't know how to move on. I'm trying to, it's whatever. It's been months. I've stopped talking to this person. I'm doing everything I can, but I'm just so sad. I'm so broken inside. What's your advice for that?
Oh, been there.
Yeah.
I think it may depend on if this grieving process contradicts your logic,
Mm-hmm.
right? If your logic says, like, I probably shouldn't be feeling this way,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like they were a great person, but I existed before them, so I should be okay after 4 months of intense grieving over it. Or something like they were totally manipulative. Why am I hurting so bad?
Okay,
over
let's
this breakup?
let's focus on the former.
Okay.
Like I say, yeah, this girl breaks up with me. Perfectly hypothetical, and
Never happened.
it would never happen. But she was great. Relationship was great. I'm just brokenhearted. Yeah. Maybe it's been 4 months or 6 months, and I'm just like, I should be farther along. I should be more over this person, but I'm still aching so much.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, I think there's a lot of unique factors that would have to go into play here. But when you analyze what you are missing, then you will determine whether or not this is grief or whether this is shame. I think putting words to this has a huge impact, because grief is the loss of something that you loved, right? It actually involves sweetness and happiness in recalling
it's
those
actually kind of
things.
beautiful.
Right.
Yeah.
Grief is a bittersweet thing.
Yeah.
Right? It is dark chocolate.
Mm-hmm.
Shame is just poison and ouchiness.
It's sharp.
And it's sharp.
Yeah.
And it's sickening, because what it means, if you're feeling shame, it means I am missing out on meaning for myself. I feel like my life has less meaning without this person. Then it means you're treating an infection.
Mm-hmm.
And that may require some more intensive work than just thinking about it and singing sad songs.
So I guess the better question is, because when you have the grief and the shame, it feels like insurmountable, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, but how can you not feel the shame of, like, I feel worse than I did before because I had this beautiful thing and now the beautiful thing's gone. I don't know when I'll be able to get it again. It's like, it's almost like you're coupling the grief of losing a person with, now my hope is shattered for all things in the future.
Yeah.
And they're not really related, but it's so hard to not feel that way.
Right. Because you're still missing, in this case, validation, right? I'm missing that water, like that much water, and I don't feel like I'm ever going to get it again.
Yeah.
Obviously there is a grief involved in that, but what makes it shame is the fact that this is a basic need, right? You don't grieve over the fact that you don't have food, right? You feel anxious because you're going to die.
Yeah.
Sort of thing.
Yeah,
I grieve over the loss of a chocolate cake, right? I don't need it, but it is a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be sad if it's gone. But I feel shame over the loss of water, food, shelter, and especially love if I don't have other like comparable sources to that.
Yeah. I think, I want to hear your thoughts in a second, but I think where I've struggled in the past is I'm not even sure what hurts me more is missing the person or just missing like what we had. You know what I mean? And I'm sure it's both, but it's like, I think sometimes, the pain is more, maybe it's just this ugly cocktail of pain. And it's like, maybe it's a bit fruitless to try and pinpoint exactly which pains are attacking me at what time. But it's like, yeah, you're grieving the loss of the person. You're feeling possibly like jilted and rejected, and maybe that's where the shame comes in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you're also feeling like, even if there's some peace around it where you're like, you know what, maybe we're better off, maybe we made the right choice, whatever, I still want her to be happy, but maybe there's still so much loss in, but what we had was so beautiful, and I don't know if it's replicatable, you know?
Mm. Yeah. I feel like I've had this conversation with a lot of friends.
Yeah.
And I think what's most helpful is to just, as you're holding space for that person, you help them recognize that, well, so for example, let's just say a friend has had, they had a great relationship. It didn't work out. They were pretty heartbroken. And then they've had subsequent relationships that also didn't work out, and they're also sad about. But then
This sounds like me. Let's just say this is
okay,
me.
so let's say this is Taylor. Our last conversation about it. Then they get, they're in a single bit again, and they start missing person A, and then they're surprised, like, why am I still feeling so much grief over that person? I thought I was over that. And then that hopelessness of maybe that was maybe they were the one, and maybe that's why I keep missing them. And I think reminding that person that that this core need to be and feel loved isn't going to go away. So there will always be some amount of, like, we're social creatures, and we're meant to bond. And so, first of all, just acknowledging the expectation of thriving single. I mean, I see people do it, but I think that's because they have some amount of acceptance of their needs shut off.
Yeah.
And so, not that you can't be happy, but this idea that, like, I shouldn't need a man, I shouldn't need a partner.
Sometimes there's almost some delusion.
Yeah. And so you've got this core need, and then for most of us right now, it is somewhat exacerbated by childhood trauma, friend trauma, other reasons why we don't feel good enough, and our self-love is compromised. That just compounds the wound of being single and being alone, which would make you miss more and miss harder the belonging that you felt. And so, I mean, I try to gently encourage those people, let's just say they're my friends, not my clients, to, once we've acknowledged there is a core need here that is being unmet that would probably be hurting you anyway. And what are the wounds from your past that are making this more painful than it would be otherwise? Those you can do something about. When you're single, when you're in a relationship, when you're married, you can go to therapy. You can go to safe people if you know how to do it, without a trained professional. And you can work on those wounds inside that are reinforcing your essentially your unlovability that is covered up and is out of sight, out of mind when you're in a really good relationship. And so I found that even people that are single and are single for a long time can become steadily healthier and even drastically healthier and less sad when they decide to do their work, their therapy work or their trauma work.
And they heal their inner child.
Because if we don't feel, it's one thing to be grieving the fact that you had a great relationship, you don't have it anymore, and now I'm alone, and this isn't really the most optimal state of a human. But it's a totally different thing to feel like starving, or I can't breathe, or every day I am not okay. That to me is an indication of trauma, not an indication of an unmet need for an adult pair bond.
Right. So it's good to recognize maybe the difference between, you know what, I'm okay, I actually really love myself, but I'm just freaking sad, versus like I feel dysfunctional, I feel like I can't move forward, I feel
There's
emotionally
no
paralyzed.
I don't enjoy my hobbies.
Yeah. That's when it maybe becomes more clinical than just life's tough. Do you guys feel like pain, and maybe specifically heart pain, compounds over years?
Heart pain.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think
I say that real quick just
Yeah.
because I feel like, and maybe because they've been more serious or because I was older and more mature, but I feel like my last 2 heartbreaks were like 10 times worse than the ones I had years ago. And I don't know that the relationships were any longer or more serious, but they just really hurt this time, you know?
Yeah. Like if you're still, I guess it should be okay to say that even if you're coupled with someone, that you still feel sad about something else,
Yeah.
right? Not because you necessarily want that thing back, but because you experienced a loss,
Mm-hmm.
right? So like Kaprena still feels sadness about her divorce.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean that she doesn't want me or that she wants to go
Right.
back to her first husband.
It's just still a wound.
But it's still a wound in there.
Yeah.
And like if we were to divorce, if we were to rupture, then that injury goes on top of that one that she already has.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay.
And it probably reopens that old wound more.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, it reinforces whatever shame messages have accompanied all my previous rejections.
Yeah. Gosh, this is brutal.
It is brutal, which is why everybody doesn't need a therapist,
Right.
but everybody needs safe people to talk to.
Yeah.
Because these things, trauma doesn't heal on its own, because trauma, by definition, is an adaptation that our brain makes to try and protect us. And so if we don't do the work to show our brain the threat is past, then that stays active. And one of the ways that we show our brains that a threat is past, like the threat of, the intense rejection that we felt by a spouse that leaves or something, is typically by coupling 2 things together. One is safe people that love you, to hold space. And then the second one is going back and feeling those feelings.
Yeah.
So you need a safe environment to access the brain wiring of I'm in danger, I'm not okay, for your body to have an exposure experience where you didn't die or it didn't kill you.
Right.
If I'm not talking to anybody about it, I'm not sharing the painful things that happened through my divorce. So not having that second component of a safe place with safe people, then I'm possibly just re-traumatizing myself. Because what a brain needs to heal is safety and exposure to the feelings.
Right.
So it doesn't have to come in the form of therapy. It often does.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons is because therapists, we're supposed to be trained to not be afraid of strong emotional expression and weeping and yelling and screaming, which is that exposure, that reliving of the experience, of the emotional experience. But if you have safe friends that do not mind when you come over and just are a wreck on their couch, or catatonic for a day, right? Whatever the emotional experience is that is stuck, if they can weather that with you and not have to change it or like what's the bright side all over you, then you can get that therapeutic exposure with anyone that can hold that space for you that you feel safe with.
So it's almost like, would you say, this is maybe an intense statement, but would you say it's impossible to heal from things if you don't talk about them?
I wouldn't say that, but I would say, okay, let me finish this. For me, 3 years ago, with the tools I had, impossible. Where I am right now, my strong preference for trying to recover from a terrible experience is with safe people, because I feel more safe with people that love me, but I also love myself and feel safe enough with myself now that I absolutely can be a loving enough presence for a lot of painful things to tie myself over until I get to somebody safe, or even possibly to move through it by myself.
Because you're essentially just, maybe you're not verbally talking about it, but you're kind of just telling yourself. You're kind of working through it yourself.
Yeah. Or just like in my car after something hard happened and I say, okay, that was really hard. I can dissociate and I can drive home and I can put the kids to bed and I can pretend like everything's fine and then cry about it with Boone and I know he'll hold space.
Mm-hmm.
Or what if I just take 10 minutes right now and I close my eyes? Maybe I put on a song that I use in my yoga practice because that cues safety for me. And I let the emotion wash over me in this safe place in my car because I do feel safe in, those environments. And that exposure work doesn't require any words.
Mm-hmm.
But if that space in my car is truly a safe place for my brain, I can do it by myself.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. Like some therapy models debate about this, but I found that it is the feeling of the emotion in a safe, sterile environment that makes it happen.
It could be talking, but it's just that it needs to be felt, needs to be expressed in some way.
Yeah, because I've had people, relate intense traumatic experiences to me with a glazed over look in their eyes. They're not feeling anything. They're totally numb. This is not therapeutic for them. Even though this is a safe, sterile space and they are talking about it, it's not actually operating on the wound. Whereas some people will be like, I'll be sitting next to them on the couch, they're just breaking down, weeping, not telling me, maybe not even able to tell me what they're feeling. But then they come out of it having operated on the trauma that was never verbalized.
Yeah. That makes sense. What do you guys do when you have someone, and this is maybe a question also for people just in their relationships, when you get someone that you just can't get to open up? You ask questions and you try to approach it a different way, but they just, for some reason, aren't comfortable opening up. Like, you hear a lot of people in relationships are like, yeah, I just can't get my husband to open up about this, or like, he won't talk about this or whatever. What's your advice to that? Like, what's a good approach with that person?
Yeah. This is a really common presentation in therapy.
Mm-hmm.
They want help, but they don't have any experience talking about their feelings.
Yeah.
And they don't know why they can't. And maybe a little plug here for one of our specialties that we really like to raise awareness about, which is dissociation.
Mm-hmm.
So dissociation, when it appears in a client at an intake, for example, that really just the ability to talk about something and show no emotion in their face.
Not really going there.
Not feeling it.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they want to, and they don't know why they can't. And maybe it's even a complaint. Like, my wife says I need to come and learn how to feel, and I really want to. I just don't know how.
Yeah.
So it's not that they're intentionally withholding. But dissociation, which is a defense mechanism that humans will employ in really traumatic situations, allows the mind and the body to kind of take space from each other, because whatever was happening at the time was so painful that our psyche said, well, if I stay connected to my body and feel the sensation of the cortisol and the adrenaline pumping through my bloodstream and making me want to run, but I can't get away because my dad's bigger or whatever's happening, we better just like cut the tie.
Yeah.
We need space from this because otherwise I might not survive this. So consistent dissociation over the course of a lifetime, like everybody dissociates sometimes, but consistent dissociation is often the reason people don't find emoting natural. And so with those kinds of clients, we're starting with a lot of body work, and we're taking it easy, and we're assuming that they want to. So we're not like trying to find the crack in their armor. We're just saying, okay.
What do you mean body work?
So body work, well, just here's a very simple example. If I suspect a client is highly dissociated on a regular basis, I'll probably give them a screener and they'll fill out some questions for me that would indicate, what level of dissociation is happening. And if it's a high level of dissociation, then I am probably just saying, all right, I want you to put your hands together, and I want you to just concentrate on pressing each matching finger set together. And I want you to feel the sensations in your fingertips. Can you feel it? And I've had clients say no. Like, I can't feel that,
Yeah.
which is wild. Or,
Yeah.
just like trace something along their hand and like, okay, you feel that? Just tune in to the tip of your finger on whatever part of your skin you're touching. And that is obviously like very
Yeah.
basic.
Yeah.
And sometimes for highly dissociated clients, they get a panic attack when they recognize like, oh my gosh,
I'm feeling my body
like
for the first time.
I have sensations, and like the last time I had sensations, I was getting hurt in some
Right,
sort of
right.
way.
Mhm.
So
And
they're
then
so
maybe-
checked out of life
Mhm.
that they don't want to feel anything.
That
Yeah.
like all of their sensory neurons are off.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
what's maybe a little bit more common, that would be an extreme level
Sure.
of dissociation. Here's a little bit.
I've seen it before.
Yeah.
Like that's
Yeah,
happened to
I
me
mean,
in session
we
before.
both have had that before.
Yeah.
Might be. So if I was leading Boone through one of these in session, I might say, okay, so he's relating an experience to me and we're intentionally working on decreasing dissociation. We would probably, to begin with, pick a milder injury. And I would say, okay, Boone, so when that happened this week, what did you feel? What can you remember feeling? And well, should we just try it? Should we
Sure.
role play it?
Yeah.
Okay, so when your wife said that to you, can you go back there in your mind and just kind of try and put yourself back in that experience, and tell me what you remember feeling, if anything.
Not the wife.
There's kind of this pit in my stomach, and this sinking in my chest.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you kind of just show me with your hand where it is, where you felt it? Mm-hmm.
It's right up there.
Are you kind of feeling it a little bit now then?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How big would you say it is if it was the shape of, I don't know, a sports ball or something?
This one's like the shape of an orange, like a medium orange.
Mm. Mm-hmm. What about that heaviness that you were just saying? Where is it in your chest? You show.
It's like it's pulling my sternum in, like it's sinking, collapsing.
Yeah. And on a scale from 1 to 10, how intense is the sensation right now that you're having?
It's like a 7.
Yeah, so pretty intense. And we would just sit with it, and as long as he was feeling safe, we
Yeah.
could sit with it and draw it out, and that is the work of connecting mind and body and decreasing dissociation. And we do that because with strong dissociation, you can't have those exposure moments that your brain needs to move through trauma.
Wow. Okay, so say you go through something, a breakup or you get fired or something, you've had a horrible day. Do you feel like it's unhealthy to go do something a little bit numbing, whether it's, I'm going to go watch Netflix for 3 hours, or I'm going to go, play video games for 3 hours, and maybe with every intention to, I don't want to numb this forever. I want to feel it eventually, but I can't deal with it right now. Do you feel like that's an unhealthy practice, or that's okay, or kind of depends?
I talk a lot about this in terms of suppressing and compartmentalizing.
Mm-hmm.
Suppressing is when you like take in this new information, these new files, and you throw it to the back of the warehouse.
Yeah.
Right. Compartmentalizing is when you say, okay, this is a lot of paperwork.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to put it in this folder, and I'm going to put it on my desk, and I'm going to get to that Monday morning.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. This task is a whole lot less intimidating than that random pile of strewn about papers
Yeah.
over there. I didn't even look at it. I don't know what it is. I
Yeah.
just know that it's back there.
Right.
And so, yeah, we encourage people when they don't have the resources to process an emotion or a trauma as soon as possible, like to try and at least like put a label on it and find a time to work on it.
Mm-hmm.
Because we recognize that like I can't work on this right now. I have to finish my work day.
Yeah.
Right. Or like I need to make it through this social event okay, or I need to make it to the weekend sort of thing. But if you've put a label on it and you have a plan to work on that, then that task of processing that emotion will become a lot less scary.
Yeah. I like that. That's nice. Cause I think a lot of times you do want to just hurl it behind you and be like, I don't even know what I'm feeling. I know it's bad. I know I don't like it. I know I feel uncomfortable. And I feel like I'm good with this, but I feel like a lot of people, for some reason, why do people have such a hard time and feel so uncomfortable and maybe even shameful crying?
Yeah.
Like, I like a good cry.
I love a good cry now.
know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I do now.
Like,
You know,
what a millennial. What a great experience that you've had. But so, like at the park this week, like I saw a parent being aggressive at their little kid because they were crying.
Yeah.
And I was just imagining being in that little boy's body,
Mm-hmm.
you know, being told by a big person, stop feeling your emotions or I'm going to not like you.
Yeah.
And more often than not, I think what happens is we're programmed what we're allowed to cry about and what we're not allowed to cry about.
Yeah.
If you get a big scraped knee as a little kid, you're, probably allowed to cry about
Right.
that. And if you go through a big breakup as a teenager, maybe your mom has the bandwidth for you to cry like 6 times about it.
Right.
But then 7th time is like, there's a limit. And we go through our family of origin learning the rules.
Or maybe it's okay if you're the teenage girl, but if you're
but
the
not
teenage
the
boy.
teenage boy.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, this is such... Boone and I...
Our hardest clients are boys.
Really?
Yeah.
Our hardest child. No. But like our son Dominic is, he is what Dr. Becky Kennedy calls a deep feeling kid. And I love that. I love that label because it's not calling him dramatic or over emotional, or even passionate, which maybe sometimes gets a bad rap or is not what we want to be called. But a deep feeler is someone that maybe needs to cry a lot.
Yeah.
And those are the people that typically get shut down the most because the adults in their life feel like it's excessive. And anyways, we're raising one of those, and he is the sweetest, deepest feeling kid I know.
Yeah.
And will get so angry, like angry to tears pretty regularly. And I try to be super aware that my words and my body language are teaching Dominic how much he's allowed to feel.
Yeah.
And I want to be so careful about that. Of course, when he's a little kid, so he sometimes still even has like feelings so big in his body that he becomes violent, and we have to take him to a place where he can be contained.
Yeah.
But I feel inside of me when this flip goes off, it's like, this is too much officially. You got to teach this boy to control his anger. And I do need to teach him. I need to help him emotionally regulate and learn that process. But that voice inside makes me want to come at him with shame and tell him that the feelings and the level of feelings you're having right now are inappropriate. So you need to cut it out.
But the thing is that works. Like if we can override an anger or sadness response with a fear response, we can shut it down.
Sure.
So it works in a bad way is what we're saying.
So like it does actually work to shut down the feeling.
It's a short-term resolution.
We can make our son throw those emotions to the back of the warehouse.
Yeah.
Right.
And then he will end up as that guy that has to live in an emotional box. Like you can't feel too much, and of course your wife's going to hate it if you feel too little, and so this is the little emotional box that you get to live in. And I really don't want to do that to my son. But I have some of that programming in me where I'm like, feel like I my shame tape is telling me how much I'm allowed to cry about something, and anyone that surpasses that, certainly if a boy surpasses that,
because you don't want to feel overly sensitive or overly dramatic or whatever. Right. Yeah. Growing up, I was probably a little more prone to tears than I appreciated, as a little boy, but yeah, I remember it didn't happen often, but there were moments in whatever 6th or 7th grade where I would, here's a great example. I had my first little pretend girlfriend in like 5th grade. And then, we were boyfriend and girlfriend over the summer. Never even saw her. We were just like talked on the phone.
Still pretty serious.
It was pretty serious.
5th grade,
It's pretty serious. Shout out to Deborah. But
we love Deborah.
But then 6th grade starts, and like a couple weeks in, I'm at recess and some girl runs up to me. She's like, "Deborah doesn't want to go out with you anymore," and of course it's because of freaking Zach. She wants to go out with Zach now, And so
we hate Zach. Shout out to that guy.
Yeah, shout out to Zach. Me and Zach actually mended our way, but the thing is, I went back into the classroom after recess, and I was like crying in my desk, and I was like so embarrassed, because I'm like you see girls in class crying all the time, and they comfort each other, and it's fine. But I just felt like this is not okay behavior. I'm going to get hell for this. And even though like my parents were great and they never made me feel less than for doing that, but just culturally, it's like little boys, they need to be tough. And it isn't, sometimes it's not even society or whatever, or, adults, but it's like, yeah, it's more natural for girls to like cry and comfort each other, and it's more natural for little boys to be like, that kid's a wuss, you know?
Well, like we say natural because it is common.
Yeah.
But the thing is, like, our little boy came out crying more than our little girl. And I think if you were to like tally the number of times that baby boys cry, it's probably about the same as little girls. Like, they really have to learn to not do that.
Yeah.
Right. Because baby boys are like, they're feeling all the same emotions that little girls are feeling.
Right.
And I guess you could argue that in as much as tears are sometimes incapacitating, then in the Stone Age, well, if you're crying, you're not going and getting food for the tribe.
Yeah.
And so like division of labor, like we could talk about that all day and stuff. But the truth is, I think maybe we chalk up more than is actually fair to women are more emotive naturally, and men are more, just logical and get it done.
Yeah.
And then we tack on non-emotive. And I don't think that's true.
Yeah.
In fact, I remember learning for the first time that it's actually really common for boys to like have to choke back tears after a wrestling match because there's so much exertion. And that's like, I think in its most purest form, the proof that tears is a way to help the body release excess pent up mobilization of whatever experience they've had.
Yeah.
Not, if you cry, you feel more sadness, or if you cry, you're just more emotional. It's just a way that we discharge the emotion that was stirred up with whatever happened to us.
Yeah.
So I might need to cry 20 times about a divorce, or 50 times, or 100 times. And I might only need to cry 3 times about, my kid going off to college, because it's, there's some energy there. I'm anxious for them. And so I think you also have to consider that it's relative to what you're going through, and that tears are usually helpful and healing.
Yeah.
I just hate that that's stigmatized, but
Right. Yeah. I mean, I always feel better after a solid cry.
Me too.
It's funny. I even feel better like having like a happy cry, when you're just really moved by something. I still feel, am I releasing oxytocin? Is that why?
That does happen when you cry, doesn't it?
I guess maybe it depends on the kind of happy cry. Just being mindful of my most recent happy cries, I find that it actually involves typically a sense of grief, a sense of nostalgia, which literally means pain of the past.
Yeah.
That if you're feeling happiness about this thing now, you're often hearkening back to a time when you didn't have that.
Okay.
Or you did have it and you miss it.
Or you did have it and you missed it.
Okay.
That's why like a happy, like sometimes you're just like laughing so hard that you're crying. And I think that's something different than like watching a beautiful movie where like they finally like fell in love at the end, or the father reunited with his son, because in that moment is the culmination of all the sadness that was happening before that moment.
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe that's why I feel like as you get older, you tend to either be more emotive, right? You're more in touch with your feelings. You're more easily moved to tears, or you've suppressed over years and you become more crotchety and more grumpy and more like, I don't want to feel that.
And more likely to get dementia.
Is that true?
Yes.
Yeah.
What is the correlation there?
Traumatic experiences, like your ACE score, your adverse childhood experiences, will significantly impact your chances of getting dementia, which makes sense if you think about it in terms of suppressing stuff. Like memories
Yeah.
Just send it all back.
Yeah.
And it gets to such an extent where like the papers are still there, the emotions, the mess is still going on back there, but I actually don't have any cognitive recollection of what that stuff is.
Oh, that's
But it's
crazy.
still impacting your body
Yeah.
because the
But you're still
experience
highly emotional.
Yeah.
and the experience of stress on your body is obviously we have a ton of research about that now. The stress chemicals that your body needs to activate also cause inflammation, which is important if you are trying to not die from being pursued by a tiger that maybe like got you in the back conscious or whatever.
Yeah.
But prolonged higher levels of those stress hormones just destroy basically all of our organs, including the brain. And so if you are surviving your stressful experiences by dissociating, those higher levels of stress hormones continue in your body, and you're just kind of shortening your life.
Yeah.
Potentially.
So do you feel like a lot of people that have had incredibly stressful or traumatic lives that will cause certain illnesses and chronic illnesses even?
Oh, Taylor, you'd probably love this book. It's called The Myth of Normal. Or also you could look at, what's the other
It's
one?
When the Body Says No.
When the Body Says No by Gabor Mate.
I love our sweetest Gabor.
Oh yeah, he's the best.
Yeah.
And he goes into pretty good detail about the correlations between autoimmune diseases and stress and the ACE scores and stuff.
Yeah.
So it's actually, I mean, it is documented that that's a thing.
Yeah. I'll read it. I'm not scared.
It's a great book.
Yeah.
I mean, Gabor is a little bit cynical for me, but I also am just so fascinated by the research that he presents, and it's really important. It was a turning point for me in deciding I can't afford to not process my emotions, and I can't afford to not pay attention to the little things that my body is telling me.
Yeah.
And then understanding so much of the messages I get about my body from just even hour to hour is so tied to what I'm experiencing emotionally, especially at home with my kids.
Right.
That's where my shame is cued the most, just in how I perceive I am failing or succeeding as a mother. And then like my headaches and my muscle tension and my sleep quality and my flexibility and just my health in general is so intensely connected to my emotional well-being that I can't afford to not pay attention to it.
Yeah, that's a good point. We just have a few minutes. I know you guys need to go, so I just want to ask a couple more questions. What for you guys is a good, and maybe not even like a scientific definition or academic definition, but for you guys personally, what do you feel is a good definition of love?
Big question.
Mm-hmm. I think that love implies value. Right? You demonstrate love by demonstrating that something or someone is valuable to you. And there are many ways to demonstrate that, right? By protecting or by feeding, by giving attention to, and I think one of the, maybe to contrast it with something else, Ty Mansfield is a notable therapist in the area who often says that if you need someone, then you can't love them, right? Because to need is to not just value something, but to have that thing keep you alive.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas love is you exist while also valuing that thing. That is when that thing has true, like intrinsic, non-utilitarian value.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I like that. What about you?
Yeah, I think obviously in family therapy, this comes up a lot because the parents will be vehemently expressing verbal love to their kid, and the kid is either not open or, an adult child looking back and saying, my experience of them was not love.
Yeah.
And I know that that the parents did the best they could, and the parents feel love for their children. But there's this other piece of what about how love is sometimes intended, but very often not felt. So I think I like what Boone said. I also think that that we can't control if people feel our love or not. But if you just take two humans that if you could wipe the trauma slates clean, then the expression of love, matching the experience of love, would happen most when conditions do not need to be met for that value to be felt.
Right.
So, I mean, we call it unconditional love. I hate that that's kind of a super buzzword right now.
Yeah.
And again, maybe Boone can love me unconditionally right now, and he can't control if my trauma is preventing me from experiencing that love. But I think trauma aside, love is the acts that produce a feeling of belonging and value in another person. And then it gets really complicated because no one isn't traumatized.
Sure.
Like everybody has stuff.
Yeah.
But the closer that we can come to removing conditions on our approval and our warmth, to me, that's what I call love. It's are there conditions here that I must meet if I don't want to lose this?
Right.
Or do I feel pretty sure that this is going to continue no matter what choices I make right now?
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful. Okay, penultimate question.
Love that.
I'd love to hear from each of you what you love most about the other.
Oh.
That is a great question. Do you want to go first?
I probably needed just a second.
Okay.
I mean, this is for the whole world to hear.
That's right.
I love Kaprena's assertiveness, and I love her power, and I love that she gets what she wants. That was one of the.
She got you.
I did.
Like when we were dating, I was looking to casually date someone long distance until my graduate program was over.
Right.
She was not.
Yeah.
And she made it happen, and I loved that happened. And now, like whenever she has an idea, she expresses a want, she has a desire, and she wants it, she makes it happen.
Yeah.
So I love that Kaprena is a powerful person.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Thank you. It's hard to say it fast, but I love that Boone he is steady as a rock in himself, and there is probably very little that I could do if I was actually trying to break him down that he could not recover from, because he loves himself and he knows who he is, and that has been the foundation that I was privileged to heal on, and it continues to just bless our family so much that I have more ups and downs, but this guy is just he's going to mostly have good days, and when he has bad days, he's going to know it, and he's going to meet his needs, and he's going to put himself first so that he can really show up. And Boone really shows up.
Yeah. Wow, that's great. You know what I love about you guys the most? I love how you guys just how you guys look at each other. It's like, yeah, when one person is talking, the other person is almost just enraptured by what's going on, and it's like it's a really high level of love, but it's also a really high level of respect and adoration, like we talked about. How I really, one of my favorite things you guys said was, to have a healthy balance, you adore your partner, but you adore yourself, and you can kind of see that in you guys, and it's awesome. Okay, my last question is,
Hold on, can we just say something that we like about you?
yeah, please. Yeah.
You are really good at facilitating these meaningful conversations, and I was just really excited to be. Well, I know you first invited him, but remember, I get what I want.
That's
so.
right. That's right.
So I was like, you should probably tell him we're a package deal, and he's like, okay.
Yeah. That's awesome.
But spaces like this are special, and you are really good at creating this.
Thank you.
So thanks for having us on.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, my last question is just, I like to, flip the mics around and ask if you guys have any questions for me, even though you don't really know me from Adam. So yeah, it could be serious, it could be trivial, but make it good because this is our last question.
Yeah, no pressure.
We got the babysitter.
She likes babysitting our kids, so
Okay,
she's
yeah.
fine. I noticed that you talk about love and heartbreak a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not your only space, but I've noticed that is an important space for you. Why that? What's your mission with that?
Yeah, I don't know that I have like a mission statement. I think it's just what is so compelling to me. Like, I think love is like, when it's good love and when it's like beautiful love, it's like the best thing that exists. And so I want to figure out how to get my hands on it, and I want to see it as often as I can, and I want to absorb it as often as I can. And so I love hearing examples of love, but I also love figuring out, okay, what do we do when the love is gone, or the love changes, or the love evolves? And so I think I've always been interested in that, but I think as I've gone through my own heartbreaks and stuff, I'm like, I feel like love is just the essence of the human experience. So like, what else should I be talking about? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, like what else is there really?
Yeah. And it's in all forms. I love talking about friendship, and I love talking about parenting, and I love talking about, just relationships in general. And so I think love permeates all of that. Yeah. Boone, you got anything for me?
Yeah. Well, maybe piggybacking off of that, Taylor, I was wondering if the universe were to make known to you that you would not have a romantic, lasting romantic relationship before you died.
Yeah.
What would you do with your life?
That's a good question. And it's honestly something for my own peace and mental health, I've tried to consider this question, because it's weird where it's like, I wholly believe and think that I will, right? And I feel like I have every reason to believe that and have faith in that and have hope in that. But I also don't want my happiness to be dependent on one thing, even if it is a huge thing. And so I've had to have lots of little chats with myself where I'm like, what would that look like? And would I be okay? And I think you have to make the decision that you will be okay, right? And it might suck, but you have to be like, okay, if I'm the world's most perpetual bachelor, if that's my calling in life, if that's my fate, then wow, I'll be the most empathetic person in the world for single people, and I'll be, I'll take my friendships more serious than anyone else. I'll take my relationships with my nieces and nephews more serious than anyone else. I'll be the best freaking uncle, because I won't have to worry about any other distractions, right? And so, like I said, I don't think that's my fate, but I do want to live in a life where, all of my joy isn't predicated on one thing. So same with children. Like, say I get married in 6 months, meet the love of my life, and we can't have kids. Now what? Am I just depressed now and can't find joy? And of course I would adopt, I would do whatever, but like, is my joy only dependent on things that are out of my control, it seems like a recipe for sadness. Is that the right answer?
Taylor, I am very impressed. Like, one,
Thanks.
because you are essentially already doing that,
Mm-hmm.
right? You are being the person that you would want to be if this was like the fate for the rest of your life,
Right.
right? Like, you are showing empathy to people. You are coaching. You are talking with us and helping us feel loved, and like you are our friend. And then I admire your ability to ask yourself that hard question that a lot of people are afraid of and don't even let themselves consider. And like, one, it makes you like so much more ready for a relationship when you've asked yourself that hard question, and just reduced your fear overall. And it's really cool to be in your courageous presence.
Yeah. Thank you, man. I
Agreed.
appreciate
So
that.
brave. And, it's turning you into that person that, like maybe your Kaprena comes along and she recognizes that stability and she admires that and she wants that. And she sees like this legacy of your podcast and, you're connecting that you've left for other people to heal as well. And I mean, someone's going to really dig that. I'm sure they already do. And then you just, you need to dig them back. But
right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on, guys. I could talk to you guys for 4 hours if we had the time, but we'll maybe have to have you come back sometime.
We would love to.
I'd love to.
Awesome. Okay. Appreciate it, guys.